Dave and I got married 16 years ago. We met in our second year of college. I studied at one of the public universities in California, and he studied at Stanford. Our acquaintance was completely accidental. We were both invited to the same frat party. Neither of us was interested in fraternity life, but we both ended up there. Somehow we found each other and discovered our shared aversion to evening events. We left together, and from then on our story began. We had a tumultuous long-distance relationship. Whenever we could meet, we met. We got married shortly after graduation. Our sexual relationship continued until our son Josh was born a year later. After that, I was less eager for adventure. Dave was in graduate school, and his schedule, as well as my childcare responsibilities, exhausted our energy. However, we managed to have sex almost every day and always on weekends. Josh was a real challenge. From an early age, we discovered his passion for discovery and learning. He was clearly smarter than both of us. We and the schools he attended supported his thirst for knowledge and action. He eventually graduated from high school early and was accepted into Johns Hopkins University at the age of just 15. Dave graduated with honors and was hired by a software startup. His work was intense and extremely satisfying. We were both always tired, and our sexual opportunities were reduced to weekends and eventually most Saturday nights. We discussed this once when Josh was about 10 years old. We agreed that we were missing something, but believed that it was normal for sexual relationships to weaken, while emotional and personal relationships strengthened. We still loved each other. Moreover, we still liked each other. We held hands when we were together on the street. Dave seemed happy with how things were going. I wasn't sure about it, but I was busy and didn't see an alternative. Then Dave received an invitation to his high school's 20-year reunion in New Jersey. For some reason, he wanted to go. I did not want to. We discussed this for a long time. In the end, Dave agreed to my proposal. He should have gone alone and had fun. He left. He left on Friday morning before I woke up. When I finally stood up, everything seemed different. Everything was wrong. I tried to convince myself that it was just another Friday, the same as if Dave had been at work all day. It didn't work. This wasn't just another Friday. Dave wasn't at work and wasn't supposed to be home that evening. Dave was in New Jersey and Josh left 2 weeks ago for Maryland. For the first time since I could remember, I was alone for an entire long weekend. I was restless and unhappy. I tried to read. By the 3rd chapter, I lost the thread of the plot. Eating alone was a challenge. On Friday evening, I went to the cinema. Halfway through the film, I couldn't remember its name. On Friday night, I barely slept. I kept waking up trying to find Dave next to me. Saturday didn't start any better. I ate my breakfast slowly and eventually threw the bloated cereal into the recycling bin. I started to develop feelings for Dave that I hadn't had in 10 years. I missed him. I needed something distracting. I decided to get a pedicure. This usually made me feel better. I made an appointment and went to the spa on Saturday afternoon. It changed my mood. While waiting, I picked up an ancient issue of a meaningless women's magazine. It contained an article about declining sexual relationships and offered tips on how to change the situation. I started reading the article while waiting and finished it during my pedicure. After that, I did something I had never done before. I stole the magazine and took it home. I read the article 2 more times that night. The author, S.J. Anderson, who I assumed was a woman, described various sexual activities that she believed would change the course of any relationship. Her descriptions were extremely detailed. I had never experienced most of what she suggested, or even heard of much of it. I was embarrassed just reading this. Finally, Anderson suggested that bringing additional partners into a relationship will further strengthen it. She suggested that women should collaborate with close friends to avoid possible remorse. She explained that taking the relationship to a new level that has never been achieved before will revitalize the relationship and, over time, become natural, extremely enjoyable, and expected. She suggested that men fantasize about promiscuous women, although they deny it, and becoming such a woman will forever seal the marriage vow, "Till death do us part." I was stunned by Anderson's proposals. I felt weak reading her advice. I never thought about what she suggested. I went to bed on Saturday night with tears in my eyes, thinking about our relationship and replaying our sex life in my head. I fell asleep dreaming about Anderson's ideas and woke up fantasizing about how they could come to fruition in our lives. On Sunday over breakfast, I read the article again and started planning. I knew that Dave had not cheated in our marriage up to this point, and I wanted to offer him an environment where he would never want to do it. When Dave returned home, I was determined to become his new woman, create a new relationship, and fulfill all his fantasies. On Sunday, I made lists and plans. I looked for ideas on the internet and found sites with videos of almost all of Anderson's proposals. I went shopping, and by Monday afternoon, I had a new collection of day clothes, night clothes. I must admit that I felt a little embarrassed buying this, but the smiling woman in the adult store was a big help when she understood my purpose. In less than 48 hours, I became more promiscuous than correct. Late in the afternoon, when Dave returned home, I wanted to surprise him. I was dressed a little more seductively than usual, with a plunging neckline and a hem that reached just above my knees. Dave responded as usual. He was tired and needed a shower and some rest. 2 minutes after he went to the shower, I followed him. Later, I told him how being alone on the weekends affected me and how I realized we were drifting. I told him about how I found the magazine, even though I had no intention of letting him read it. I told him I was using the time to think about our relationship and how much I missed what it used to be. I told him I was going on a wild ride and hoped he would join. As he left, he looked somewhat puzzled and confused. I felt energized and hoped I hadn't gone too far, too fast. Dave returned home early that evening, something he rarely did without reason. He seemed lighter, and his smile was infectious. I was delighted with his attitude. I was ready, if necessary, to influence his attitude with my charms. I was wearing a short, almost transparent blanket and nothing else. Later, we had a light dinner. Dave took off all his clothes and took away his shorts. After dinner, we sat in the living room with an excellent Cabernet Sauvignon. I asked Dave how the reunion went. He started by telling me how boring the weekend was. He told me about a meeting on Friday evening with the former quarterback and several other classmates, most of whom were not very sociable. He said he encountered Roger Moore and then Kim Booth. He told me that all three were social outcasts and stuck together out of necessity. Dave had never told me about his school days before. He said that Roger, Kim, and he were sitting around the table at Saturday dinner with their former high school math teacher. After dinner, Dave told me that he left early because there wasn't much to keep him there. I never realized how difficult Dave's school years were, and I didn't tell him about it. He told me about Carol and the circumstances of their breakup. I asked him if he went to the reunion in hopes of seeing Carol again. He thought I might be right, but he didn't realize it at the time. However, he felt that Roger and Kim meeting again somewhat made up for it. When I asked him to tell me more about them, he told me that they were a three-person team of computer geeks. He didn't understand how Roger had lost his way, but he told me that Kim, like the story of the ugly duckling, had blossomed both professionally and physically, and was now studying elementary particles at Princeton University. I felt a little sad when he talked about Kim, but given the rest of the reunion, I knew he would be focused on seeing her again. When the conversation slowed and the wine finished, I took him to bed to once again practice what we had done over the past 24 hours and learn something new. 6 months later, we had used everything we could, some for multiple sessions, and had exhausted the suggestions in the journal article. We never missed a day unless Dave had to travel or Josh was home for the holidays. Last month, I took Dave to an adult store to rent some instructional videos. We rented a couple of videos, and when we returned them, we bought a few more. The videos were fun to watch, and even if we were familiar with the actions, it would have been fun to perform them along with the videos. All but one of the videos had at least one scene with 3 or 4 participants. I remembered the last sentence in Anderson's article, but didn't suggest it to Dave. I wasn't sure Dave or I were ready for multi-party action. In March, Dave received a letter from his alma mater. It was a notice of a series of lectures to be given by visiting professors and guest speakers. One of the lectures was on computational requirements in particle physics research, and the speaker was Kim Booth, a professor and researcher at Princeton University. I opened it and immediately recognized the name. When Dave got home, I gave it to him and asked him if he thought it was the same Kim Booth from his high school days that he reconnected with at his high school reunion. He thought it was possible, and in my opinion, insisted on checking it out. The next night, he confirmed our guest. Kim Booth was going to be in California. I told him that he should attend the lecture because it was about computer requirements. I also suggested that he contact Kim and invite her to have dinner with us while she was here. He seemed nervous about the idea, but eventually agreed to continue. The next day, he tracked Kim down and told her that he was going to attend a lecture and that he and I both thought it would be a good idea to have dinner with her while she was around. Kim agreed. She told Dave that she was going to have dinner with the faculty after the lecture, but could fly out a day early and meet us for dinner the night before. Dave and I discussed it that evening, and Dave confirmed it to Kim the next day. For the next 5 weeks, Dave was both nervous and distracted. I wasn't sure why, but I figured it had something to do with the fact that we, or perhaps I, were having dinner with Kim. Preoccupation with the upcoming dinner with Kim did not affect his sexual energy at all. We were as joyful and energetic as before, and sometimes even too active. At one point, I asked him if he had imagined sex with Kim while we were doing it. He rejected this offer. He had no point of comparison. However, he was ready to support this idea if I believed that it would contribute to our implementation. I've been thinking about this for a while. Was he suggesting we add another person to our sex life? I didn't know, but I put it aside for later discussion. Dinner with Kim was wonderful. We got along great. Dave was nervous at first, but Kim and he acted like old colleagues with arm's-length hugs and blowing kisses. Kim and I were like best friends who hadn't seen each other in years. After dinner, we parted like old friends with warm hugs and kisses. On the way home, I asked him if he now had enough information to fantasize about Kim when we made love. He refused to answer, so I added it to the things I was putting off for the future. 3 weeks later, Dave received another letter from the university. This time from Princeton, and this time I didn't open it. I gave it to Dave when he got home that evening. He sat at the dining table with a letter in front of him, and I sat next to him. He seemed reluctant to open it. I offered, but he refused. I asked why he was so hesitant. He said he had no idea what the letter was about, but he had a feeling that this letter would change our lives, and he wasn't sure if he wanted to open it. After a few moments, I pushed the letter closer to him. He took his knife out of his pocket, opened it, took the letter and cut it. He closed the knife and put it on the table. Then he took out one sheet of paper from the envelope and unfolded it. He read it carefully twice. I didn't try to read over his shoulder, although I really wanted to. "So, what's the verdict?" I asked. "Someone from the university noticed my presence at a lecture last month and invited me to come to New Jersey to discuss how we can continue the mutually beneficial opportunities at Princeton." The letter was signed by the heads of the departments of computer science and physics. What does it mean? They apparently did some research on my career and current work. I think they want to offer me a position at the university. If I'm right, we'll have to move to New Jersey. They want me to fly to them next week. I suddenly felt heavy. I was glued to my chair, almost unable to move. I never thought about leaving California, let alone going to New Jersey. Was I ready for such a change? What if Dave was right, and there was an offer at stake that I couldn't refuse? Was I willing to move or insist on staying put? Was this a result of my insistence on having dinner with Kim? When I could speak without trembling, I told Dave about my concerns and fears. He was very understanding. He also wasn't a fan of returning to New Jersey, but didn't think it would be wise to pass up the opportunity without knowing all the details. I calmed my fears and agreed that he should respond positively and fly next week. Dave was grateful for my understanding, but insisted that he would not go unless I went with him. If he was right, and there was an offer on the table that couldn't be refused, He said I needed to have some understanding of the environment so I could intelligently participate in the decision. He was determined, and I reluctantly agreed to go with him. Dave completed all the preparations, and we flew to Newark the following Wednesday. We were met by a limousine from the university and taken to a five-star hotel near the university. On Thursday, we were met at 8 in the morning by two limousines. One took Dave to Princeton for his meetings. In the second, there was a young woman who introduced herself as Keisha. She explained that she would be my guide for the day. She planned to show me the city and its surroundings. We were able to go shopping, have lunch, and look at local properties before returning to the hotel to meet Dave. Over dinner at the hotel that evening, Dave took stock of his day. In the morning, he met with the head of the computer science department and toured the computer center and laboratory. He had lunch with him, the head of the physics department, and the dean of the college. In the afternoon, he accompanied the head of the physics department and toured the laboratory and research facilities. Late in the afternoon, he met with both department chairs before being driven back to his hotel. The bottom line was that he was offered a position in the computer science department, specifically to help researchers in the field of physics. The salary was the same as his current salary, but without stock options. To sweeten the deal, they offered him a 2-year doctorate program in computer science, paid entirely by the university. During these 2 years, he will have a light course load. After completing his PhD, he will lead a new university department focused on providing advice to the university, its partners, and clients. They offered to pay all moving costs, including any costs associated with selling our current home and an interest-free loan to purchase a home near the university. Dave didn't give a definitive answer. He asked for a week to consider the proposal and its implications for him and his family. He committed to giving a final answer by Wednesday next week. I was stunned. I expected something to come out of the trip, but I avoided thinking about the possibility of moving to New Jersey. Dave was prepared for my hesitation. He clearly wanted to accept the offer. While I was thinking about it, he reminded me that my parents moved to Pennsylvania 2 years ago to take advantage of lower taxes for retirees. He reminded me that if we were in New Jersey, they would only be a short trip away and we could see them more often. Additionally, Josh was in Maryland, also on a short trip. He recently told us that he won't be coming home for the summer. He wanted to take summer courses, and the college offered him a job to help with expenses. He reminded me that I was not currently working, and the dean told him that the university could use additional help if I wanted to work, even part-time. He also estimated that after selling our home in California and moving, we would be financially secure. Finally, he explained that the workload at Princeton would be significantly less than in his current position, and we would be able to spend more time together. He was convincing, and I agreed. I decided to take this change as an adventure. We returned home on Friday and spent the weekend crunching numbers and putting together a resignation letter for his employer. He notified Princeton on Monday that he accepted the offer and received written confirmation via email an hour later. He signed the proposal and faxed the letter back to the university. On Tuesday, he resigned, giving 30 days' notice. After a hasty meeting with the employer, they understood his decision and agreed with him, knowing that he was not looking for the position. They said he could leave at any time on 30 days' rent and a prorated bonus. Dave thought having a former employee at Princeton will improve their image. They only asked him to take as much time as needed to make sure his responsibilities were covered. In 2 weeks, I was already planning to move. 2 months later, we were living in New Jersey. Dave was right in his analysis. We paid cash for our new home, and our bank account was healthier than ever. Josh came over last weekend to help with the arrangements, and my parents were planning to visit us next week. 2 weeks after closing on the house, Kim called me. I knew we hit it off when we first met, but I didn't expect her to contact me. I was a little surprised when she suggested we meet for lunch at the end of the week. I agreed, and on Thursday we met in a quiet cafe nearby. We talked in general terms about the move and how we were adapting. She also shared information about herself. When we got to discussing specific places where we lived, we discovered that we lived in the same area about 3 blocks from each other. It was a pleasant lunch, and at Kim's suggestion, we decided to meet again the following week, only this time at her home. It was close enough that I could walk there. On Thursday, I walked to Kim's house. She invited me in and took me to the kitchen, where she was preparing lunch. As we walked through the house, I couldn't help but admire the amazing layout and beautiful decor. Kim suggested we dine on the enclosed veranda behind the kitchen, with a table, chairs, lounge chairs, and a swimming pool. Once outside, I realized that the veranda was surrounded by tall plants and the side windows were frosted. The setting was intimate, quiet, and very private. After lunch, we settled down on a few sun loungers with some leftover wine that we drank during lunch. Finally, Kim asked if I wanted to try the pool. I replied that it was very tempting, but unfortunately, I did not take a swimsuit. "It's okay," Kim replied. "I swim here almost every day and never wear a swimsuit." I must have expressed some concern because she continued, "It's a very private setting and I never felt uncomfortable. I'd like to join you if you don't mind." I nodded and Kim stood up, grabbed a couple of towels from a nearby closet, and began unbuttoning her blouse. I stood up and also began to unbutton my blouse, although more slowly. I took off my pants and barely had time to unclasp my bra when Kim took off her panties and dove headfirst into the water. When she surfaced, she said the water was wonderful and that I should join her. I took off the rest of my clothes and slowly entered the water using the nearby steps. After a while, we were swimming, splashing, and generally having fun. I had never gone skinny dipping before, and it was amazing. I felt free, weightless, and without any embarrassment. At that moment, I could not imagine a more pleasant environment. 10 minutes later, we were leaning on the edge of the pool, looking at each other, when Kim spoke. "You know, Mary, you are a very beautiful woman." Wine, water, and nakedness made me frivolous. "Thank you." Kim then kissed me. At the same time, the sensible corner of my brain advised caution. I smiled at Kim, thanked her again, and told her that I needed time to process my feelings. We parted that day with a warm hug and a second kiss. A week later, I was at Kim's again for lunch. I had a wonderful week, mentally playing out all the possibilities. I'm sure Dave noticed something was going on, as our daily intimate sessions were even better than usual. I was ready to respond to Kim's offer if it was still valid. I planned to use the pool again, and, for this purpose, left my bra and panties at home. After lunch, we moved to the pool. I put my glass of wine on the veranda and suggested we go swimming again. Before Kim could return with the towels, I took off my shirt, took off my pants, and dove into the pool. Kim laughed as she slowly undressed in front of me and continued to laugh as she swam towards me in the pool. Kim asked, "What do you think Dave would do if he saw us now? Are you suggesting we include Dave in our Thursday dinners?" "Maybe. Do you think he would be interested?" "Maybe. We talked about including another person in our sex sessions. You offer?" "I like men just as much as women, maybe even more. I need to think about this. Dave and I had an unfulfilled relationship that started in high school. I'm worried about fueling this fire. I would never forgive myself if I ruined your relationship. I think we've reached the point where we're strong enough to handle this. Remember, we have already considered the possibility of a 3 and maybe a 4. Would you agree to this?" "Undoubtedly. I felt like Dave had some simmering feelings for you after homecoming. However, he may resist if you are our partner. I think he might want to protect my feelings, and you're beautiful. He will pretend to resist for a while, but in the end he will agree." "How do you propose to involve him, not scaring away?" "Why don't we do it again in the pool? With his schedule, he won't be able to come to dinner, but how about you invite us to dinner on Friday or Saturday night? I will make sure he accepts the invitation." "Agreed. How about next Friday?" "It will do. Only you have to call him and make an invitation." "I'll call tomorrow evening. You will need to postpone your evening classes until I call." "Okay, just don't call too late, and we'll bring more wine." On Friday evening, the phone rang. The timing was good as we had just finished the first trick of the evening. I shouted, "Dave, can you answer?" A few minutes later, Dave walked into the kitchen with a puzzled look on his face. It was Kim. She invited us to dinner at her place the following Friday. What do you think? I told you that Kim and I had lunch together. We got along very well. You've known her for a long time. I guess she wants to have a long-term relationship with us. We must accept the invitation and bring wine. Fine. I don't want to give her false hopes. Can you call her back, please? Certainly. I'll call her tomorrow. Now sit down. I have something for you to eat. The next day I called Kim. We chatted a bit. I told her how easy it was to convince Dave. We did some planning, but in the end, I left the timing and extent of the evening's activities up to her. The following Friday, Dave and I were at Kim's house at exactly 7 o'clock in the evening. I had 2 bottles of New Zealand Sauvignon Blanc, Cloudy Bay. Kim planned a light chicken dinner so we wouldn't be too full after the meal. Kim opened the door wearing a light, airy chiffon dress with an uneven hem. Stunning would be an understatement. I felt underdressed in her knee-length flared skirt, white blouse with the top 3 buttons undone, and a wide black leather belt. I gently nudged Dave out of his trance, and we entered the house. After the obligatory and slightly suggestive greetings with hugs and kisses, Kim led us into the living room at the back of the house. She took my 2 bottles of wine to chill and returned with 3 glasses and a bottle of Chenin Blanc. We sat together until we had finished the first bottle of wine. Kim led us into the dining room, opened another bottle of wine, and served us a beautiful chicken dinner with a spade with broccoli. After dinner, we moved to the pool with a 3rd bottle of wine. Shortly after we sat down, Dave remarked, "Nice pool." Wow, this will be easy, I thought. Do you want to try? Kim answered. Yes, but we didn't bring swimsuits. It's not a problem for me if it's not a problem for you. Dave moved closer to me and leaned over. Are you okay with this? He whispered. I don't mind. We talked about adding a 3rd person into our lives. Why not Kim? Don't know. I just assumed it would be a man. What if it goes further? What do you mean? What if I have sex with Kim? Will you be okay with this? Isn't that what we were looking at when we discussed the 3rd person? I guess so. I'm okay with this, and it seems like you are too. Let's try. As Dave moved back to his previous position, Kim stood up and walked over to the towel closet. My eyes followed her as she walked. I heard a splash when I turned back. When I looked back, Dave's clothes were on the chair he was sitting on, and he was already in the pool, looking at us. Kim returned with towels. We stood together, watching Dave as he swam in place. Kim looked at him for a brief minute, put the towels on the lounge chair, and turned to me. Looks like he's in, she said. I think so, I replied. The next 2 hours were amazing. Unfortunately, the time for games has come to an end. Standing in the kitchen, Kim asked if we wanted to stay the night. We instantly agreed. In the morning, we had Danish rolls and coffee and walked back home. The next 2 weeks were full of activity. The 2 and 3 of us got together as often as we could. In the end, we established a convenient schedule that took into account all our responsibilities and personal pleasures. We became a family. We ate together, showered together, and slept together. We went to dinner, the theater, concerts, and sporting events together, and in various combinations. About 6 months after our first pool party, we had a small celebration where Kim exchanged vows with Dave and I. It wasn't official to avoid any potential problems for Dave, but we treated it like a real wedding. Dave once suggested that he got the best of this arrangement. After all, it was like he had 2 hot wives. He wondered if I was missing something. I told him that my time with who is more than I ever expected, and my time with him is everything I wanted. He hasn't raised the issue since then, and neither has Kim. About a month before we exchanged vows, I collected all the films we had purchased, took them to Dave's office, and shredded them. Finally, I destroyed the magazine article written by S.J. Anderson. Subscribe to our channel so that your love doesn't cheat on you, and go ahead and listen to the next story, because this story is nothing compared to the next one. If you're under 18, don't even think, click to the next one. Click to the next one.